Good morning everyone, my name is Michelle. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another video. It's Wednesday morning, the 26th of June, and it's a warm one here in Northern England. Continuing with the search for Jay Slater, the 19-year-old from Oswaldtwistle here in the great county of Lancashire, as we approach the 10th day of the search for Jay on the Spanish island of Tenerife. He was there with friends for the NRG Festival, and he was staying in Los Cristianos in the south of the island. When he left the NRG Festival in the early morning hours of Monday, he left with two guys that apparently he didn't know, and he travelled with them close to 30 miles north to the small village of Masca up in the mountains. Around 8 a.m. on the Monday morning, he called his friend Lucy and said that he didn't know where he was, that he'd been spiked by a cactus, that his phone only had 1% battery, and that he was thirsty and he had no water. His phone last pinged in the area of the rural Deteno Park up there in the mountains. That was 8:50, and he has not been seen or heard from ever since. It's a desperate search, and we're going to cover all of the latest. Let's go. So yesterday, a lot of journalists who were there on the scene were reporting that the search seems to be toning down, that there's less people out there in the mountains searching. But probably that's not quite true. I mean, look, that acute search has to tone down at some point. But what we're hearing is that they're just fanning out. So you start from the location where the person last was, where you had that last confirmed sighting. So we've got the phone ping, which is specific to one area of the rural Deteno Park at 8:50. But also you've got an eyewitness. You've got Ophelia, who is the owner of the cafe next to the Airbnb where Jay went with those two guys. And she saw Jay. She saw Jay walking on his own up into the hills. She thought it was strange that he appeared to be going in the wrong direction. She passed in a car as he was walking up the hills. There was most probably a language barrier. She tried to communicate to him that the next bus was at 10 a.m. Now, why he didn't want to stay that couple of hours and just wait for the bus, we may never know. If Jay is not located alive, or not located at all even, we'll never know why he chose not to wait for that bus. But the search team started in that area, and they are now fanning out to cover a wider area. And this is supported by the fact that the local police there in Tenerife have confirmed that several specialist dogs from the Spanish capital of Madrid will be now joining the search and rescue effort. And the Spanish cops said the civil guard continues with the search device for the young British man who disappeared in the Masca neighbourhood. Today, several canine guides of the civil guard dispatched from Madrid with their canine agents specialised in the search for people on large areas of land belonging to the Sinological Service of the Civil Guard. Now, there have been a number of dogs out there. I've seen a Malinois, I've seen, I think, a Labrador, I've seen a Weimaraner, but these dogs from Madrid, I expect, will be air centres. And I want to just show you this little clip here. This is a search and rescue team in the Calder Valley here in the UK. And they have a team of dogs that are specialised in finding people who are lost in the Calder Valley. This is rugged terrain, but not nearly as rugged as that out there in Tenerife. But they have a team of border collies. It's interesting to see how these dogs operate.
What he'll do is he'll set the dog off. The dog will do what we call quartering. The dog will hunt, covering the wind. Remember, the dog is searching the wind, not the ground. So all the dog needs to do is cover enough of the area that the dog's been where wind's coming off all of the area in order for the dog to find that missing person. Okay, so you can see the handler's prepared his dog to set off and search the area. He's just fitted a working jacket to the dog, both to give him the visual of the dog and also to trigger the dog so the dog knows she's working, she's doing her job. The objective of this is for the dog to cover enough of the area that the dog's been through the wind that's come off all of the ground. So the dog is searching the wind, not the ground, and that's important to bear in mind. The dog does not need to cover all the ground. The dog merely needs to cover the wind that's been on all of the ground. What will happen when the handler goes into the area to begin with, they will make an assessment based on their experience, the terrain and the wind conditions of how big a patch of ground they cover by going over. On a day like today, the wind is very strong. That dog is probably covering around 50 yards. And what the handler will do will be to devise a search strategy.
This is just a training exercise, but it gives you a feel for how these air scenting dogs work. They cover a large area on their own, like they just go off on their own. And if they locate someone, then they trek all the way back to the handler and notify them. It's a little bit like, you know, the TV show Lassie, which I loved when I was a kid, by the way. That dog then takes the handler to where they found the lost or injured person. So that dog is working on their own. They're thinking a strategy through on their own. And then it's their job to go and inform the handler that they've found something. Calder Valley Search and Rescue Team uses Border Collies for this, who are very, very intelligent. And this type of environment, that's what Border Collies were bred for, running miles and miles and miles with sheep flocks. Turning their hand to search and rescue comes very naturally. I don't know what breed of dog the Madrid teams are using, but any athletic breed, such as a Malinois, Springer Spaniel, who is capable of thinking for themselves and working out a search strategy for themselves, would be ideal for that kind of job. There is a problem, though, with this now in the search for Jay. Certainly the example that I've showed you, they are out looking for live people. Unfortunately, if Jay is deceased, and he's been deceased for quite some time, there is going to be significant decomposition. So it's whether the dogs are trained to alert their handler to someone who is a decomposed body rather than alive or a very recently deceased person. But we'll see how they do. It just shows that the Spanish cops are not giving up just yet. Also reported in the British media yesterday was the fact that the Spanish cops had let everyone know a success, that they'd found a lost hiker who had been missing since last Friday in the same area where they're looking for Jay. Now, the Mail Online tracked this dude down, and he's someone called David Larkin. It says here, a British hiker found by search teams hunting for missing raver Jay Slater on the Spanish island of Tenerife has insisted he didn't need rescuing after being tracked down by Mail Online. David Larkin, 51, was discovered by police and mountain rescue teams on Friday as they scoured a remote gorge for Jay, who hasn't been seen for more than a week. Posting on Facebook, local police described how they had successfully found Mr. Larkin after locals reported seeing him wandering into mountains a mile from where they were looking for the teenager. The area around Masca has been a hive of activity since Jay went missing on June 17th, and it was during these searches that, according to local authorities, a tired and disoriented Mr. Larkin was found by search teams and helped out of the ravine, and that's David. But he insists he wasn't lost. He's been to that area many, many times. This is the little house that he was staying in. He wasn't lost. And he said that the cops were, I guess, trying to prove to the public that they actually can find someone. It just so happens that this guy didn't need finding. He was out there hiking, and he said, No, I'm fine. I'm all right. Now, Jay's family are also out doing, I guess you would say, their own investigation. Jay's dad is being very proactive. He's out there putting flyers around the nearest larger town, which is Santiago del Teide. I've heard lots of ways of saying that word. This is a reporter from the Manchester Evening News.
Behind me here is the church square in the village of Santiago del Teide. It's the area where CCTV captured footage of a man who Jay's family believe could be him walking past at around 6 p.m. on Monday, June 17th, the day that he went missing. The possible sighting, however, that was captured on CCTV cameras in this square has not yet been confirmed by the Civil Guard, who are leading the missing persons investigation here in Tenerife. Speaking to me from the village of Masca, local police said there have still been no developments and no progression with the ongoing search.
And the family are pinning their hopes that a young man seen worse for wear in that square near the church, sitting on a bench with two guys, and this image from a CCTV camera. They're pinning their hopes that that is Jay. But why would he be there, and why would he not be making contact with anybody? You know, they're kind of working along the premise that he's being held against his will. I mean, anything's possible. It is possible that that could be the case. There's no evidence to the contrary of that, but it would mean, though, that Ophelia, seeing Jay walking off on his own, that he was picked up and helped off the mountain and then abducted. Is it likely? No, not really. However, it is possible. And it's understandable that the family are following that theory because it means Jay's still alive. If he went out into the mountains, got completely dehydrated, disoriented, and sadly passed away, there's no hope, is there? There's no hope whatsoever. But with a theory like, well, he's run off with someone and they're now holding him against his will, or even that he's run off and he's staying away for his own reasons, it means he's alive. And you can't blame them at all for wanting to hold on to any small amount of hope that they can. The mayor of Santiago del Teide said that he understands and he's got a huge amount of sympathy for the family. This is Emilio Navarro, the mayor of this town. As a father, I understand all our resources and means are being used to find him. But never fear, never fear. Backups arrived from the UK in the shape of ex-detective Mark Williams Thomas. Now, I talked about him the other day. Now an investigative journalist, he appears on TV when there's high-profile cases. He seems to just like come out of the woodwork. He hasn't been an actual detective for 24 years. But don't let that stop the narrative that this guy could potentially save the day. And it's understandable that the family are going to hold on to any amount of hope that they can. And he's out there now. He was spotted in Tenerife on Tuesday, so yesterday. And he's been quoted in the media saying that he can get answers in just 3 days. So if he arrived yesterday, let's give him a few hours to settle in. But he was seen making inquiries in Masca. So let's give him till, let's say, Friday to see whether he gets those answers. He believes that he can track down these two guys that Jay stayed with. All right. Well, look, they're in the UK. They're from Luton in Bedfordshire. So why is Mark Williams Thomas tracking them down in Tenerife when they're in Luton? I don't know. But anyway, Lancashire police don't want to speak to them. The Met police don't want to speak to them. Bedfordshire police don't want to speak to them. Why? Because it's not their investigation. Now, if the Spanish police, in the parallel investigation that they will be doing, those detectives will be exploring possible abduction or foul play scenarios. If they decide that those two guys need to be spoken to again, then they'll contact the British police and say, "Oi, we need these guys." That's how it works. But Mark Williams Thomas, somewhat out of the loop with actual real policing. And he made a complete hash of the Nicola Bulley case. Now, he's a friend of Peter Falding. Now, early on in Jay's case, I said, look, as long as we don't get Peter Falding there, saying he's not in the river. But then we've got Mark Williams Thomas, who is a self-confessed friend of Peter. So he's there now. Right, well, this is what he said about the Nicola Bulley case back when Nicola was missing. And it was all wrong. All wrong.
Back to the investigation. The fact that the dog was walking between the bench and the gate, does that give us any indications where Nicola may have gone?
I think it is. I think it's really significant.
It was really significant because Willow, the Springer Spaniel, very intelligent breed, Cassie is a Springer Spaniel. Same type as Willow, kind of like a working type rather than the more, let's say, dopey and sedate show type of Springer. Anyway, Willow was right there. She stayed right there. And Mark here says, it's significant that Willow stayed right there. However, he then goes on to completely ignore that very, very important detail.
And that's why it's so important as an investigator always to come back to the scene. I call this a crime scene. That's how we talk about it.
Well, it wasn't a crime scene. No. In the College of Policing report into the investigation, which was released last November, and I went over every single word of that report, the College of Policing did criticise Lancashire Constabulary for not cordoning off that bench area for at least a short space of time. However, what the College of Policing actually said was the search and rescue effort was very good and all appropriately managed.
And what's really significant is the police have said it is unlikely, and their theory is that she hasn't left the area. But let's be very clear about that. It is impossible to say that. And I'll tell you why. Because the route in, which is across the bridge from where she left her car, down the path and through this gate here, is exactly the same route that she could have taken out of here, because there is no CCTV on any of this route. She could have left here, either her own free will, and got into perhaps a car, someone supporting her, or left on her own free will, and she would not have been seen.
Well, that's why Lancashire Police were appealing for dashcam. Now, Garstang Road is a busy road, and no one saw her. There's only a very small, section of Garstang Road that isn't covered by CCTV, and that is the area from the school up to the beginning of the Riverwalk path, and it takes 2.5 minutes to walk that route. So if Nicola had turned left and walked down Garstang Road, there's a possibility she wouldn't have been seen, or she went over the road and walked along the river that way. But what's the issue? What's the problem with it that Mark Williams Thomas completely ignored? The fact that Willow stayed exactly where she was. That's the issue. And Mark Williams Thomas forgot that, as did everybody else. Everybody else. So I don't hold out much hope that Mark Williams Thomas is going to solve the Jay Slater case. I fear he's going to drum up more of a circus than it is already. I mean, look, is it possible to become more of a circus than it is already? Possibly not, honestly. It's wild. Absolutely wild. But let's ground ourselves with the facts we do know and extrapolate from those facts, not go off on wild tangents. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys. There's a horse. Hello, horse. Hello, Mr. Horse. Now, last time I was here was 6th of February, so Nicola had been missing for, hold on a minute, 10 days. when I came here, and spring is just about breaking out here in Lancashire.